The fifth story. Ricciardo, surnamed Ilzima, giveth Messer Francesco Virgilesi a palfrey of his and Hath, therefore his leave to speak with his wife. She keeping silence, he in her person replieth unto himself, and the effect after ensueth in accordance with his answer. Pamphilo having made an end, not without laughter on the part of the ladies, of the story of Fra Puccio, the queen with a commanding air bade Elissa follow on. She, rather tartly than otherwise, not out of malice but of old habit, began to speak thus. Many folk, knowing much, imagine that others know nothing, and so oft-times, what while they think to overreach others, find, after the event, that they themselves have been outwitted of them. Wherefore I hold his folly great who setteth himself without occasion to test the strength of another's wit. But for that maybe all are not of my opinion, it pleaseth me, whilst following on the given order of the discourse, to relate to you that which befell a Pistoles gentleman by reason thereof. There was in Pistia a gentleman of the Virgilesi family, by name Messer Francesco, a man of great wealth and understanding, and well advised in all else, but covetous beyond measure. Being made provost of Milan, he had furnished himself with everything necessary for his honorable going thither, except only with a palfrey handsome enough for him, and finding none to his liking, he abode in concern thereof. Now there was then in the same town a young man called Ricciardo, of little family, but very rich, who still went so quaintly clad and so brave of his person that he was commonly known as Ilzima, and he had long in vain loved and courted Messer Francesco's wife, who was exceeding fair and very virtuous. Now he had one of the handsomest palfreys in all Tuscany, and set great store by it for its beauty, and it being public to every one that he was enamored of Messer Francesco's wife. There were those who told the latter that, should he ask it, he might have the horse for the love Ilzima bore his lady. Accordingly, moved by covetise, Messer Francesco let call Ilzima to him, and sought of him his palfrey by way of sale, so he should proffer it to him as a gift. The other, hearing this, was well pleased and made answer to him, saying, Sir, though you gave me all you have in the world, you might not avail to have my palfrey by way of sale, but by way of gift you may have it, ween as it pleaseth you, on condition that, ere you take it, I may have leave to speak some words with your lady in your presence, but so far removed from every one that I may be heard of none other than herself. The gentleman, urged by avarice and looking to outwit the other, answered that it liked him well and that he might speak with her, as much as he would. Then, leaving him in the saloon of his palace, he betook himself to the lady's chamber, and telling her how easily he might acquire the palfrey, bade her come hearken to Ilzima, but charged her take good care to answer neither little or much to aught that he should say. To this the lady much demurred, but, it behoving her ensue her husband's pleasure, she promised to do his bidding and followed him to the saloon, to hear what Ilzima should say. The latter, having renewed his covenant with the gentleman, seated himself with the lady in a part of the saloon at a great distance from everyone and began to say thus, Noble lady, meseemeth certain that you have too much wit not to have long since perceived how great a love I have been brought to bear you by your beauty, which far transcendeth that of any woman whom methinketh I ever beheld. To say nothing of the engaging manners and the peerless virtues which be in you, and which might well avail to take the loftiest spirits of mankind. Wherefore it were needless to declare to you in words that this is the greatest and most fervent that ever man bore woman. And thus, without fail, will I do so long as my wretched life shall sustain these limbs, nay, longer. For that, if in the other world folk love as they do here below, I shall love you to all eternity. Wherefore you may rest assured that you have nothing, be it much or little worth, that you may hold so wholly yours, and whereon you may in every wise so surely reckon as myself, such as I am, and that likewise which is mine. And that of this you may take assurance by very certain argument, I tell you that I should count myself more graced, did you command me somewhat that I might do and that would pleasure you, than if, I commanding, all the world should promptliest obey me. Since then I am yours, even as you have heard. It is not without reason that I dare to offer up my prayers to your nobility, wherefrom alone can all peace, all health and all well-being derive for me, and no other whence. Yea, as the humblest of your servants, I beseech you, dear my good and only hope of my soul, which midmost the fire of love, feedeth upon its hope in you that your benignity may be so great, and your past rigor shown unto me, who am yours, on such wise be mollified that I, recomforted by your kindness, may say that, like as by your beauty I was stricken with love, even so by your pity have I life, which latter and your haughty soul incline not to my prayers. Will without fail come to naught, and I shall perish, and you may be said to be my murderer. Letting be that my death will do you no honor, I doubt not eke, but that, conscience by times pricking you therefore, you will regret having wrought it and whiles, better disposed, will say in yourself, Alack, how ill I did not to have compassion upon my poor Zema. And this repentance, being of no avail, will cause you the great annoy. Wherefore, so this may not betide, now that you have it in your power to succor me, bethink yourself, and ere I die, be moved to pity on me. For that with you alone it resteth to make me the happiest or the most miserable man alive. I trust your courtesy will be such that you will not suffer me to receive death in guerdon of such and so great a love, but will with a glad response and full of favor quicken my fainting spirits, which flutter, all dismayed, in your presence. Therewith he held his peace, and heaving the deepest of sighs, followed up with sundry tears, proceeded to await the lady's answer. The latter whom the long court he had paid her, the joustings held, and the serenades given in her honor, and other like things done of him for the love of her, had not availed to move, was moved by the passionate speech of this most ardent lover, and began to be sensible of that which she had never yet felt, to wit, what manner of thing love was. And albeit, in ensuance of the commandment laid upon her by her husband, she kept silence, she could not withal hinder sundry gentle sighs from discovering that which, in answer to ill Zema, she would gladly have made manifest. Ill Zema, having waited a while and seeing that no response ensued, was wondered and presently began to divine the husband's device. But yet, looking her in the face and observing certain flashes of her eyes towards him now and again, and noting, moreover, the sighs which she suffered not to escape her bosom with all her strength, conceived fresh hope and heartened thereby, took new counsel, and proceeded to answer himself after the following fashion, she hearkening the while. Zema mine, this long time, in good sooth, have I perceived thy love for me to be most great and perfect, and now by thy words I know it yet better and am well pleased therewith, as indeed I should be. Algates and I have seemed to thee harsh and cruel, I will not have thee believe that I have at heart been that which I have shown myself in countenance. Nay, I have ever loved thee and held thee dear above all other men, but thus hath it behoved me do, both for fear of others and for the preserving of my fair fame. But now is the time at hand, when I may show thee clearly that I love thee, and guerdon thee of the love that thou hast borne and bearest me. Take comfort, therefore, and be of good hope, for that a few days hence Messer Francesco is to go to Milan for provost, as indeed thou knowest, who hast for the love of me given him thy goodly palfrey. And weenas he shall be gone, I promise thee by my troth and of the true love I bear thee, that before many days thou shalt without fail foregather with me, and we will give gladsome and entire accomplishment to our love. And that I may not have to bespeak the other whiles of the matter, I tell thee presently that, weenas thou shalt see 2 napkins displayed at the window of my chamber, which giveth upon our garden. Do thou that same evening at nightfall make shift to come to me by the garden door, taking good care that thou be not seen. Thou wilt find me awaiting thee, and we will all night long have delight and pleasance one of another, to our heart's content. Having thus spoken for the lady, he began again to speak in his own person, and rejoined on this wise, Dearest lady, my every sense is so transported with excessive joy for your gracious reply that I can scarce avail to make response, much less to render you due thanks. Nay, could I e'en speak as I desire, there is no term so long that it might suffice me fully to thank you as I would fain do, and as it behoveth me. Wherefore I leave it to your discreet consideration to imagine that which, for all my will, I am unable to express in words. This much only I tell you, that I will without fail bethink myself to do as you have charged me, and being then, peradventure, better certified of so great a grace as that which you have vouchsafed me, I will, as best I may, study to render you the utmost thanks in my power. For the nonce there abideth no more to say, wherefore, dearest lady mine, God give you that gladness and that weal which you most desire, and so to him I commend you. For all this the lady said not a word, whereupon ill Zema arose and turned towards the husband, who, seeing him risen, came up to him and said, laughing, "How deemest thou? Have I well performed my promise to thee?" "Nay, sir," answered ill Zima, "for you promised to let me speak with your lady, and you have caused me speak with a marble statue." These words were mighty pleasing to the husband, who, for all he had a good opinion of the lady, conceived of her a yet better, and said, "Now is thy palfrey fairly mine." "Aye is it, sir," replied ill Zima, "but had I thought to reap of this favor received of you such fruit as I have gotten, I had given you the palfrey without asking it of you. And would God I had done it, for that now you have bought the palfrey, and I have not sold it." The other laughed at this, and being now provided with a palfrey, set out upon his way a few days after, and betook himself to Milan to enter upon the provostship. The lady, left free in her house, called to mind ill Zima's words and the love he bore her, and the palfrey given for her sake, and seeing him pass often by the house, said in herself, "What do I? Why waste I my youth? Yonder man is gone to Milan, and will not return these 6 months. When will he ever render me them again? When I am old. Moreover, when shall I ever find such a lover as ill Zima? I am alone and have no one to fear. I know not why I should not take this good opportunity, what while I may. I shall not always have such leisure as I presently have. None will know the thing, and even were it to be known, it is better to do and repent than to abstain and repent." Having thus taken counsel with herself, she one day set 2 napkins in the garden window, even as ill Zima had said, which when he saw, he was greatly rejoiced, and no sooner was the night come than he betook himself, secretly and alone, to the gate of the lady's garden, and finding it open, passed on to another door that opened into the house, where he found his mistress awaiting him. She, seeing him come, started up to meet him and received him with the utmost joy, whilst he clipped and kissed her 100,000 times, and followed her up the stair to her chamber, where, getting them to bed without a moment's delay, they knew the utmost term of amorous delight. Nor was this first time the last, for that, what while the gentleman abode at Milan, and even after his coming back, ill Zima returned thither many another time, to the exceeding satisfaction of both parties. Footnote 169, lit. The summit, or in modern slang, the tip-top, i.e. the pink of fashion. Footnote 170, i.e. this love shall I bear you. This is a flagrant instance of the misuse of ellipsis, which so frequently disfigures Boccaccio's dialogue. Footnote 172, sin. A rare or strange means nuovo consiglio. The word nuovo is constantly used by Boccaccio in the latter sense, as is consiglio in its remoter signification of means, remedy, etc. The 6th story. Arisicerdio eminutuelo, being Ianeamoridi of the wife of Philippello, Fighnolfi, and knowing her jealousy of her husband, ContiriVth, by representing that Philippllo was on the ensuing day to be with his own wife in a bagnio, to bring her to the latter place, where, thinking to be with her husband, she findth that she hath a bidden with Rixardo. Elissa having no more to say, the queen, after commending the sagacity of ill Zima, bade Fiametta proceed with the story, who answered all smilingly, "Willingly, madam," and began thus. "It behoveth Somdel to depart our city, which, like as it aboundeth in all things else, is fruitful in instances of every subject, and as Elissa hath done, to recount somewhat of the things that have befallen in other parts of the world. Wherefore, passing over to Naples, I shall tell how one of those she saints, who feign themselves so shy of love, was by the ingenuity of a lover of hers brought to taste the fruits of love, ere she had known its flowers, the which will at once teach you circumspection in the things that may hap, and afford you diversion of those already befallen. In Naples, a very ancient city and as delightful as any in Italy or maybe more so, there was once a young man, illustrious for nobility of blood and noted for his much wealth, whose name was Rixardo Menudolo. Albeit he had to wife a very fair and lovesome young lady, he fell in love with one who, according to general opinion, far overpassed in beauty all the other ladies of Naples. Her name was Catella, and she was the wife of another young gentleman of like condition, hight Filippello Fighnolfi, whom, like a very virtuous woman as she was, she loved and cherished over all. Rixardo, then, loving this Catella, and doing all those things whereby the love and favor of a lady are commonly to be won, yet for all that availing not to compass aught of his desire, was like to despair. And unknowing or unable to rid him of his passion, he neither knew how to die nor did it profit him to live. Abiding in this mind, it befell that he was one day urgently exhorted by certain ladies of his kinsfolk to renounce this passion of his, seeing he did but weary himself in vain. For that Catella had none other good than Philipello, of whom she lived in such jealousy that she fancied every bird that flew through the air would take him from her. Rixaerdo, hearing of Catella's jealousy, forthright bethought himself how he might compass his wishes, and accordingly proceeded to feign himself in despair of her love, and to have therefore set his mind upon another lady, for whose love he began to make a show of jousting and tourneying, and doing all those things which he had been used to do for Catella. Nor did he do this long before well nigh all the Neapolitans, and among the rest the lady herself, were persuaded that he no longer loved Catella, but was ardently enamored of this second lady. And on this wise he persisted until it was so firmly believed not only of others, but of Catella herself, that the latter laid aside a certain reserve with which she was wont to entreat him, by reason of the love he bore her, and coming and going, saluted him familiarly, neighbor-wise, as she did others. It presently befell that, the weather being warm, many companies of ladies and gentlemen went, according to the usance of the Neapolitans, to divert themselves on the banks of the sea and there to dine and sup. And Rixaerdo, knowing Catella to be gone thither with her company, betook himself to the same place with his friends, and was received into Catella's party of ladies, after allowing himself to be much pressed, as if he had no great mind to abide there. The ladies and Catella fell to rallying him upon his new love, and he, feigning himself sore inflamed therewith, gave them the more occasion for discourse. Presently, one lady going hither and thither, as commonly happeneth in such places, and Catella being left with a few whereas Rixaerdo was, the latter cast at her a hint of a certain amour of Philipello her husband, whereupon she fell into a sudden passion of jealousy, and began to be inwardly all afire with impatience to know what he meant. At last, having contained herself a while and being unable to hold out longer, she besought Rixaerdo, for that lady's sake whom he most loved, to be pleased to make her clear of that which he had said of Philipello. Whereupon quoth he, "You conjure me by such a person that I dare not deny aught you ask me. Wherefore I am ready to tell it you, so but you promise me that you will never say a word thereof either to him or to any other, save whenas you shall by experience have seen that which I shall tell you to be true. For that, when you please, I will teach you how you may see it." The lady consented to that which he asked, and swore to him never to repeat that which he should tell her, believing it the more to be true. Then, withdrawing apart with her, so they might not be overheard of any, he proceeded to say thus: "Madam, and I loved you as once I loved, I should not dare tell you aught which I thought might vex you, but since that love is passed away, I shall be less chary of discovering to you the whole truth. I know not if Philipello have ever taken umbrage at the love I bore you, or have believed that I was ever loved of you. Be this as it may, he hath never personally shown me aught thereof. But now, having peradventure awaited a time whenas he deemed I should be less suspicious, it seemeth he would fain do unto me that which I misdoubt me he feareth I have done unto him, to wit, to have my wife at his pleasure. As I find, he hath for some little time past secretly solicited her with sundry messages, all of which I have known from herself, and she hath made answer thereunto according as I have enjoined her. This very day, however, ere I came hither, I found in the house, in close conference with my wife, a woman whom I set down incontinent for that which she was, wherefore I called my wife and asked her what the woman wanted. Quoth she is the agent of Philipello, with whom thou hast saddled me, by dint of making me answer him and give him hopes, and she saith that he will know once for all what I mean to do, and that, and I will, he would contrive for me to be privily at a bagnio in this city. Nay, of this he prayeth and importuneth me. And hadst thou not, I know not why, caused me keep this traffic with him, I would have rid myself of him after such a fashion that he should never more have looked whereas I might be. Thereupon meseemed this was going too far, and that it was no longer to be borne, and I bethought myself to tell it to you, so you might know how he requiteth that entire fidelity of yours, whereby aforetime I was nigh upon death. And so you shall not believe this that I tell you to be words and fables, but may, ween as you have a mind thereto, openly both see and touch it, I caused my wife make this answer to her who awaited it, that she was ready to be at the bagnio in question tomorrow at none, weenas the folk sleep. With which the woman took leave of her, very well pleased. Now methinketh not you believe that I will send my wife thither. But, were I in your place, I would contrive that he should find me there in the room of her he thinketh to meet, and weenas I had abidden with him a while, I would give him to know with whom he had been, and render him such honour thereof as should beseem him. By which means methinketh you would do him such a shame that the affront he would fain put upon yourself, and upon me would at one blow be avenged. Catella, hearing this, without anywise considering who it was that said it to her or suspecting his design, forthright, after the wont of jealous folk, gave credence to his words and fell a-fitting to his story certain things that had already befallen. Then, fired with sudden anger, she answered that she would certainly do as he counselled. It was no such great matter, and that assuredly, if Philipello came thither, she would do him such a shame that it should still recur to his mind, as often as he saw a woman. Rixaerdo, well pleased at this, and him seeming his device was a good one and in a fair way of success, confirmed her in her purpose with many other words and strengthened her belief in his story, praying her, nathless, never to say that she had heard it from him, the which she promised him on her troth. Next morning, Rixaerdo betook himself to a good woman, who kept the bagnio he had named to Catella, and telling her what he purposed to do, prayed her to further him therein as most she might. The good woman, who was much beholden to him, answered that she would well and agreed with him what she should do and say. Now in the house where the bagnio was, she had a very dark chamber, for that no window gave thereon by which the light might enter. This chamber she made ready and spread a bed there, as best she might, wherein Rixaerdo, as soon as he had dined, laid himself and proceeded to await Catella. The latter, having heard Rixaerdo's words and giving more credence thereto than behoved her, returned in the evening, full of despite, to her house, whither Philipello also returned, and being by chance full of other thought, maybe did not show her his usual fondness. When she saw this, her suspicions rose yet higher, and she said in herself, forsooth, his mind is occupied with yonder lady with whom he thinketh to take his pleasure tomorrow, but of a surety this shall not come to pass. And in this thought she abode well nigh all that night, considering how she should bespeak him, weenas she should be with him. What more the hour of none come, she took her waiting woman, and without anywise changing counsel, repaired to the bagnio that Rixaerdo had named to her, and there finding the good woman, asked her if Philipello had been there that day, whereupon quoth the other, who had been duly lessoned by Rixaerdo, Are you the lady that should come to speak with him? I am I, answered Catella. Then, said the woman, get you in to him. Catella, who went seeking that which she would fain not have found, caused herself to be brought to the chamber where Rixaerdo was, and entering with covered head, locked herself in. Rixaerdo, seeing her enter, rose joyfully to his feet, and catching her in his arms, said softly, Welcome, my soul. Whilst she, the better to feign herself other than she was, clipped him and kissed him and made much of him, without saying a word, fearing to be known of him if she should speak. The chamber was very dark, wherewith each of them was well pleased, nor for long abiding there did the eyes recover more power. Rixaerdo carried her to the bed, and there, without speaking, lest their voices should betray them, they abode a long while, to the greater delight and pleasance of the one party than the other. But presently, it seeming to Catella time to vent the resentment she felt, she began, all afire with rage and despite, to speak thus. Alas, how wretched is women's lot, and how ill bestowed the love that many of them bear their husbands. I unhappy that I am, these 8 years have I loved thee more than my life, and thou, as I have felt, art all afire and all consumed with love of a strange woman, wicked and perverse man that thou art. Now with whom thinkest thou to have been? Thou hast been with her, whom thou hast too long beguiled with thy false blandishments, making a show of love to her, and being enamored elsewhere. I am Catella, not Rixaerdo's wife, disloyal traitor that thou art. Hearken if thou know my voice. It is indeed I, and it seemeth to me 1,000 years till we be in the light, so I may shame thee as thou deservest, scurvy discredited cur that thou art. Alack, woe is me! To whom have I borne so much love these many years? To this disloyal dog, who, thinking to have a strange woman in his arms, hath lavished on me more caresses and more fondnesses in this little while I have been here with him than in all the rest of the time I have been his. Thou hast been brisk enough today, renegade cur that thou art, that usest at home to show thyself so feeble and forespent and impotent. But praised be God, thou hast tilled thine own field and not, as thou thoughtest, that of another. No wonder thou camest not anig me yesternight. Thou lookheadst to discharge thee of thy lading elsewhere, and wouldst fain come fresh to the battle. But thanks to God and my own foresight, the stream hath e'en run in its due channel. Why answerest thou not, wicked man? Why say'st thou not somewhat? Art thou grown dumb, hearing me? Cock's faith, I know not what hindereth me from thrusting my hands into thine eyes, and tearing them out for thee. Thou thoughtest to do this treason very secretly, but Purdy, one knoweth as much as another. Thou hast not availed to compass thine end. I have had better beagles at thy heels than thou thoughtest. Rixardo inwardly rejoiced at these words, and without making any reply, clipped her and kissed her and fondled her more than ever, whereupon quoth she, following on her speech, Ay, thou thinkest to cajole me with thy feigned caresses, fascious dog that thou art, and to appease and console me. But thou art mistaken. I shall never be comforted for this till I have put thee to shame therefore in the presence of all our friends and kinsmen and neighbors. Am I not as fair as Rixardo's wife, thou villain? Am I not as good a gentlewoman? Why dost thou not answer, thou sorry dog? What hath she more than I? Keep thy distance, touch me not, thou hast done enough feats of arms for today. Now thou knowest who I am well assured that all thou couldst do would be perforce. But so God grant me grace, I will yet cause thee suffer want thereof, and I know not what hindereth me from sending for Rixardo, who hath loved me more than himself, and could never boast that I once even looked at him. Nor know I what harm it were to do it. Thou thoughtest to have his wife here, and it is as if thou hadst had her, inasmuch as it is none of thy fault that the thing hath miscarried. Wherefore, were I to have himself, thou couldst not with reason blame me. Brief, many were the lady's words, and sore her complaining. However, at last, Rixardo, bethinking himself that, and he let her go in that belief, much ill might ensue thereof, determined to discover himself and undeceive her. Wherefore, catching her in his arms and holding her fast so she might not get away, he said, Sweet my soul, be not angered. That which I could not have of you by simply loving you, love hath taught me to obtain by practice, and I am your Rixardo. Catella, hearing this and knowing him by the voice, would have thrown herself incontinent out of bed, but could not. Whereupon she offered to cry out. But Rixardo stopped her mouth with one hand and said, Madam, this that hath been may henceforth on no wise be undone, though you should cry all the days of your life. And if you cry out or cause this ever anywise to be known of anyone, two things will come thereof. The one, which should no little concern you, will be that your honor and fair fame will be marred. For that, albeit you may avouch that I brought you hither by practice, I shall say that it is not true, nay, that I caused you come hither for moneys and gifts that I promised you, whereof for that I gave you not so largely as you hoped, you waxed angry and made all this talk and this outcry. And you know that folk are more apt to credit ill than good, wherefore I shall more readily be believed than you. Secondly, there will ensue thereof a mortal enmity between your husband and myself, and it may as well happen that I shall kill him as he me, in which case you are never after like to be happy or content. Wherefore, heart of my body, go not about at once to dishonor yourself, and to cast your husband and myself into strife and peril. You are not the first woman, nor will you be the last, who hath been deceived, nor have I in this practiced upon you to bereave you of your own. But for the exceeding love that I bear you and am minded ever to bear you, and to be your most humble servant. And although it is long since I in all that I possess, or can, or am worth have been yours and at your service, henceforward purpose, that they shall be more than ever so. Now you are well advised in other things, and so I am certain you will be in this. Catella, what while Rixardo spoke thus, wept sore, but, albeit she was sore provoked and complained grievously, nevertheless, her reason allowed so much force to his true words that she knew it to be possible that it should happen as he said. Wherefore quoth she, Rixardo, I know not how God will vouchsafe me strength to suffer the affront, and the cheat thou hast put upon me. I will well to make no outcry here whither my simplicity and overmuch jealousy have brought me. But of this be assured that I shall never be content, till one way or another, I see myself avenged of this thou hast done to me. Wherefore leave me, hold me no longer. Thou hast had that which thou desiredst and hast tumbled me to thy heart's content. It is time to leave me, let me go, I prithee. Rixaerdo, seeing her mind yet overmuch disordered, had laid it to heart never to leave her till he had gotten his pardon of her. Wherefore, studying with the softest words to appease her, he so bespoke and so entreated and so conjured her that she was prevailed upon to make peace with him, and of like accord they abode together a great while thereafter in the utmost delight. Moreover, Catella, having thus learned how much more savory were the lover's kisses than those of the husband, and her former rigor being changed into kind, love-liking for Rixaerdo. From that day forth she loved him very tenderly, and thereafter, ordering themselves with the utmost discretion, they many a time had joyance of their loves. God grant us to enjoy ours. The seventh story. Tdaldo Elisiae, having fallen out with his mistress, departeth Florence, and returning thither, after a while, in a pilgrim's favor, speaketh with the lady and maketh her cognizant of her error. After which he delivereth her husband, who had been convicted of murdering Him, from death and reconciling Him with his brethren, thenceforward discreetly enjoyeth himself with his mistress. Fiametta being now silent, commended of all the queen to lose no time, forthright committed the burden of discourse to Emilia, who began thus: It pleaseth me to return to our city, whence it pleased the last two speakers to depart, and to show you how a townsman of ours regained his lost mistress. There was, then, in Florence a noble youth, whose name was Tedaldo Elisi, and who, being beyond measure enamored of a lady called Madame Ermelina, the wife of one Aldobrandino Palermini, deserved for his praiseworthy fashions to enjoy his desire. However, fortune, the enemy of the happy, denied him this solace, for that, whatever might have been the cause, the lady, after complying a while with Tedaldo's wishes, suddenly altogether withdrew her good graces from him, and not only refused to hearken to any message of his, but would on no wise see him. Wherefore he fell into a dire and cruel melancholy. But his love for her had been so hidden that none guessed it to be the cause of his chagrin. After he had in divers ways studied Amen to recover the love him seemed he had lost without his fault, and finding all his labor vain, he resolved to withdraw from the world, that he might not afford her, who was the cause of his ill, the pleasure of seeing him pine away. Wherefore, without saying aught to friend or kinsman, save to a comrade of his, who knew all, he took such moneys as he might avail to have, and departing secretly, came to Ancona, where, under the name of Filippo di San Lozio, he made acquaintance with a rich merchant, and taking service with him, accompanied him to Cyprus on board a ship of his. His manners and behavior so pleased the merchant that he not only assigned him a good wage, but made him in part his associate, and put into his hands a great part of his affairs, which he ordered so well and so diligently that in a few years he himself became a rich and famous and considerable merchant. And albeit, in the midst of these his dealings, he oft remembered him of his cruel mistress, and was grievously tormented of love and yearned sore to look on her again, such was his constancy that 7 years long he got the better of the battle. But chancing one day to hear sing in Cyprus a song that himself had made aforetime, and wherein was recounted the love he bore his mistress, and she him, and the pleasure he had of her, and thinking it could not be she had forgotten him, he flamed up into such a passion of desire to see her again that, unable to endure longer, he resolved to return to Florence. Accordingly, having set all his affairs in order, he betook himself with one only servant to Ancona, and transporting all his good thither, dispatched it to Florence to a friend of the Anconese his partner, whilst he himself, in the disguise of a pilgrim returning from the Holy Sepulchre, followed secretly after with his servant, and coming to Florence, put up at a little hostelry kept by two brothers in the neighborhood of his mistress's house, whereto he repaired first of all to see her, and he might. However, he found the windows and doors and all else closed, wherefore his heart misgave him she was dead or had removed thence, and he betook himself, in great concern, to the house of his brethren, before which he saw 4 of the latter clad all in black. At this he marveled exceedingly, and knowing himself so changed both in habit and person from that which he was used to be, weenas he departed thence, that he might not lightly be recognized, he boldly accosted a cordwainer hard by, and asked him why they were clad in black. Whereto he answered, Yonder men are clad in black, for that it is not yet a fortnight since a brother of theirs, who had not been here this great while, was murdered. And I understand they have proved to the court that one Aldobrandino Palermini, who is in prison, slew him, for that he was a well-wisher of his wife, and had returned hither unknown to be with her. Tedaldo marveled exceedingly that anyone should so resemble him as to be taken for him, and was grieved for Aldobrandino's ill fortune. Then, having learned that the lady was alive and well, and it being now night, he returned, full of various thoughts, to the inn, and having supped with his servant, was put to sleep well nigh at the top of the house. There, what with the many thoughts that stirred him, and the badness of the bed, and peradventure also by reason of the supper, which had been meagre, half the night passed, whilst he had not yet been able to fall asleep. Wherefore, being awake, him seemed about midnight he heard folk come down into the house from the roof, and after through the chinks of the chamber door he saw a light come up thither. Thereupon he stole softly to the door, and putting his eye to the chink, fell espying what this might mean, and saw a comely enough lass who held the light, whilst 3 men, who had come down from the roof, made towards her. And after some greetings had passed between them, one of them said to the girl, "Henceforth, praised be God, we may abide secure, since we know now for certain that the death of Tedaldo Elysai hath been proved by his brethren against Aldobrandino Palermini, who hath confessed thereto, and judgment is now recorded. Nevertheless, it behoveth to keep strict silence, for that, should it ever become known that it was we shall be in the same danger as is Aldobrandino." Having thus bespoken the woman, who showed herself much rejoiced thereat, they left her, and going below, betook themselves to bed. Tedaldo, hearing this, fell considering how many and how great are the errors which may befall the minds of men, bethinking him first of his brothers, who had bewept and buried a stranger in his stead, and after of the innocent man accused on false suspicion, and brought by untrue witness to the point of death, no less than of the blind severity of laws and rulers, who ofttimes, under cover of diligent investigation of the truth, cause, by their cruelties, prove that which is false, and style themselves ministers of justice and of God, whereas indeed they are executors of iniquity and of the devil. After which, he turned his thought to the deliverance of Aldobrandino, and determined in himself what he should do. Accordingly, arising in the morning, he left his servant at the inn, and betook himself alone, ween as it seemed to him time, to the house of his mistress, where, chancing to find the door open, he entered in and saw the lady seated, all full of tears and bitterness of soul, in a little ground floor room that was there. At this sight he was like to weep for compassion of her, and drawing near to her, said, "Madam, afflict not yourself, your peace is at hand." The lady, hearing this, lifted her eyes and said, weeping, "Good man, thou seemest to me a stranger pilgrim. What knowest thou of my peace or of my affliction?" "Madam," answered Tedaldo, "I am of Constantinople, and am but now come hither, being sent of God to turn your tears into laughter, and to deliver your husband from death." Quoth she, "And thou be of Constantinople, and newly come hither. How knowest thou who I am, or who is my husband?" Thereupon, the pilgrim, beginning from the beginning, recounted to her the whole history of Aldobrandino's troubles, and told her who she was and how long she had been married, and other things which he very well knew of her affairs. Whereat she marveled exceedingly, and holding him for a prophet, fell on her knees at his feet, beseeching him for God's sake, and he were come for Aldobrandino's salvation, to dispatch, for that the time was short. The pilgrim, feigning himself a very holy man, said, "Madam, arise and weep not, but hearken well to that which I shall say to you, and take good care never to tell it to any. According to that which God hath revealed unto me, the tribulation wherein you now are hath betided you because of a sin committed by you aforetime, which God the Lord hath chosen in part to purge with this present annoy, and will have altogether amended of you. Else will you fall into far greater affliction." "Sir," answered the lady, "I have many sins, and know not which one, more than another, God the Lord would have me amend. Wherefore, and you know it, tell me, and I will do what I may to amend it." "Madam," rejoined the pilgrim, "I know well enough what it is, nor do I question you thereof the better to know it, but to the intent that, telling it yourself, you may have the more remorse thereof. But let us come to the fact. Tell me, do you remember ever to have had a lover?" The lady, hearing this, heaved a deep sigh and marveled sore, supposing none had ever known it, albeit, in the days when he was slain who had been buried for Tedaldo, there had been some whispering thereof, for certain words not very discreetly used by Tedaldo's confidant, who knew it. Then answered, I see that God discovereth unto you all men's secrets, wherefore I am resolved not to hide mine own from you. True it is that in my youth I loved over all the ill-fortuned youth whose death is laid to my husband's charge, which death I have bewept as sore as it was grievous to me, for that, albeit I showed myself harsh and cruel to him before his departure, yet neither his long absence nor his unhappy death hath availed to tear him from my heart. Quoth the pilgrim, the hapless youth who is dead you never loved, but Tedaldo Elysei I. But tell me, what was the occasion of your falling out with him? Did he ever give you any offense? Certes, no, replied she. He never offended against me. The cause of the breach was the prate of an accursed friar, to whom I once confessed me and who, when I told him of the love I bore Tedaldo and the privacy I had with him, made such a racket about my ears that I tremble yet to think of it, telling me that, and I desisted not therefrom, I should go in the devil's mouth to the deepest deep of hell, and there be cast into everlasting fire. Whereupon there entered into me such a fear that I altogether determined to forswear all further converse with him, and that I might have no occasion therefore, I would no longer receive his letters or messages. Albeit, I believe, had he persevered a while, instead of getting him gone, as I presume in despair, that, seeing him, as I did, waste away like snow in the sun, my harsh resolve would have yielded, for that I had no greater desire in the world. Footnote 176, i.e. it was not the dead man, but Tedaldo Elysei whom you loved. Lo sventurato, Giovanni fu morto non amisti voi mai, ma Tedaldo Elysei si. Madam, rejoined the pilgrim, it is this sin alone that now afflicteth you. I know for certain that Tedaldo did you no manner of violence. Whenas you fell in love with him, you did it of your own free will, for that he pleased you. And as you yourself would have it, he came to you and enjoyed your privacy, wherein both with words and deeds you showed him such complacence that, if he loved you before, you caused his love redouble 1,000-fold. And this being so, as I know it was, what cause should have availed to move you so harshly to withdraw yourself from him? These things should be pondered a while beforehand, and if you think you may presently have cause to repent thereof, as of ill-doing, you ought not to do them. You might, at your pleasure, have ordained of him, as of that which belonged to you, that he should no longer be yours. But to go about to deprive him of yourself, you who were his, was a theft and an unseemly thing, whenas it was not his will. Now you must know that I am a friar, and am therefore well acquainted with all their usances, and if I speak somewhat at large of them for your profit, it is not forbidden me, as it were to another. Nay, and it pleaseth me to speak of them, so you may henceforward know them better than you appear to have done in the past. Friars of old were very pious and worthy men, but those who nowadays style themselves friars, and would be held, such have nothing of the monk but the gown. Nor is this latter even that of a true friar, for that, whereas of the founders of the monastic orders they were ordained straight and poor, and of coarse stuff, and demonstrative of the spirit of the wearers, who testified that they held things temporal in contempt whenas they wrapped their bodies in so mean a habit. Those of our time have them made full and double and glossy, and of the finest cloth, and have brought them to a quaint pontifical cut, insomuch that they think it no shame to flaunt it withal peacock wise. In the churches and public places, even as do the laity with their apparel. And like as with the sweepnet the fisher goeth about to take many fishes in the river at one cast, even so these, wrapping themselves about with the amplest of skirts, study to entangle therein great store of prudish maids and widows and many other silly women and men, and this is their chief concern over any other exercise. Wherefore, to speak more plainly, they have not the friar's gown, but only the colors thereof. Footnote 177, i.e. friar's gowns. Boccaccio constantly uses this irregular form of analogy, especially in dialogue. Moreover, whereas the ancients desired the salvation of mankind, those of our day covet women and riches, and turn their every thought to terrifying the minds of the foolish with clamors and depicturements, and to making believe that sins may be purged with almsdeeds and masses, to the intent that unto themselves, who, of poltroonery, not of devoutness, and that they may not suffer fatigue, have, as a last resort, turned friars. One may bring bread, another send wine, and a third give them a dole of money for the souls of their departed friends. Certes, it is true that almsdeeds and prayers purge away sins, but, If those who give alms knew on what manner folks they bestow them, they would or keep them for themselves, or cast them before as many hogs. And for that these know that, the fewer the possessors of a great treasure, the more they live at ease. Every one of them studieth with clamours and bugbears to detach others from that whereof he would fain abide sole possessor. They decry lust in men, in order that they who are chidden desisting from women, the latter may be left to the chiders. They condemn usury and unjust gains, to the intent that, it being entrusted to them to make restitution thereof, they may, with that which they declare must bring to perdition him who hath it, make wide their gowns and purchase bishoprics and other great benefices. Footnote 180, lit. Pictures, paintings, debenture. But evidently here used in a tropical sense, Boccaccio's apparent meaning being that the hypocritical friars used to terrify their devotees by picturing to them, in vivid colors, the horrors of the punishment reserved for sinners. And when they are taken to task of these and many other unseemly things that they do, they think that to answer, "Do as we say and not as we do," is a sufficient discharge of every grave burden, as if it were possible for the sheep to be more constant and stouter to resist temptation than the shepherds. And how many there be of those to whom they make such a reply who apprehend it not after the fashion in which they say it, the most part of them know. The monks of our day would have you do as they say, to wit, fill their purses with money, trust your secrets to them, observe chastity, practice patience and forgiveness of injuries, and keep yourselves from evil speaking all things good, seemly, and righteous. But why would they have this? So they may do that, which if the laity did, themselves could not do. Who knoweth not that without money idleness may not endure? And thou expend thy monies in thy pleasures, the friar will not be able to idle it in the monastery. And thou follow after women, there will be no room for him, and except thou be patient or a forgiver of injuries, he will not dare to come to thy house to corrupt thy family. But why should I hark back after every particular? They condemn themselves, in the eyes of the understanding, as often as they make this excuse. And they believe not themselves able to abstain and lead a devout life, why do they not rather abide at home? Or, if they will e'en give themselves unto this, why do they not ensue that other holy saying of the gospel, Christ began to do and to teach? Let them first do and after teach others. I have in my time seen 1,000 of them wooers, lovers, and haunters, not of lay women alone, but of nuns. Aye, and of those that make the greatest outcry in the pulpit. Shall we, then, follow after these who are thus fashioned? Whoso doth it doth that which he will, but God knoweth if he do wisely. Footnote 184, sic per lo modo, but quare not rather in the sense. Footnote 185, i.e., if they must enter upon this way of life, to wit, that of the friar. Footnote 186, the reference is apparently to the opening verse of the Acts of the Apostles, where Luke says, "The former treatise have I made, O Theophilus, of all that Jesus began to do and to teach." It need hardly be remarked that the passage in question does not bear the interpretation Boccaccio would put upon it. But granted even we are to allow that which the friar who chid you said to you, to wit, that it is a grievous sin to break the marriage vow. Is it not a far greater sin to rob a man, and a greater yet to slay him or drive him into exile, to wander miserably about the world? Every one must allow this. For a woman to have converse with a man is a sin of nature. But to rob him, or slay him, or drive him into exile proceedeth from malignity of mind. That you robbed Tedaldo I have already shown you, in despoiling him of yourself, who had become his of your spontaneous will. And I say also that, so far as in you lay, you slew him, for that it was none of your fault showing yourself. As you did, hourly more cruel that he slew not himself with his own hand. And the law willeth that whoso is the cause of the ill that is done be held alike guilty with him who doth it. And that you were the cause of his exile, and of his going wandering 7 years about the world cannot be denied. So that in whichever one of these 3 things aforesaid, you have committed a far greater sin than in your converse with him. But let us see, maybe Tedaldo deserved this usage. Certes, he did not. You yourself have already confessed it, more by token that I know he loveth you more than himself. No woman was ever so honored, so exalted, so magnified over every other of her sex as were you by him, Whenas he found himself where he might fairly speak of you, without engendering suspicion. His every good, his every honor, his every liberty were all committed by him into your hands. Was he not noble and young? Was he not handsome among all his townsmen? Was he not accomplished in such things as pertain unto young men? Was he not loved, cherished, and well seen of everyone? You will not say nay to this either. Then how, at the bidding of a scurvy, envious numbskull of a friar, could you take such a cruel resolve against him? I know not what error is that of women who eschew men and hold them in little esteem, weenas, considering what themselves are and what and how great is the nobility, beyond every other animal, given of God to man. They should rather glory weenas they are loved of any and prize him over all and study with all diligence to please him, so he may never desist from loving them. This how you did, moved by the prate of a friar, who must for certain have been some broth-swilling pasty-gorger, you yourself know, and most like he had a mind to put himself in the place whence he studied to expel others. Footnote 187. Sick, but the past tense, loved, is probably intended, as the pretended pilgrim had not yet discovered Tedaldo to be alive. This, then, is the sin that divine justice, the which with a just balance bringeth all its operations to effect, hath willed not to leave unpunished. And even as you without reason studied to withdraw yourself from Tedaldo, so on like wise hath your husband been, and is yet, without reason, in peril for Tedaldo, and you in tribulation. Wherefrom and you would be delivered, that which it behoveth you to promise, and yet more to do, is this, that, should it ever chance that Tedaldo return hither from his long banishment, you will render him again your favor, your love, your goodwill, and your privacy, and reinstate him in that condition wherein he was, ere you foolishly hearkened to yonder crack-brained friar. The pilgrim having thus made an end of his discourse, the lady, who had hearkened thereto with the utmost attention, for that his arguments appeared to her most true, and that, hearing him say, she accounted herself of a certainty afflicted for the sin of which he spoke, said, Friend of God, I know full well that the things you allege are true, and in great part by your showing do I perceive what manner of folk are these friars, whom till now I have held all saints. Moreover, I acknowledge my default without doubt to have been great in that which I wrought against Tedaldo, and an I might, I would gladly amend it on such wise as you have said. But how may this be done? Tedaldo can never more return hither, he is dead, wherefore I know not why it should behove me promise that which may not be performed. Madam, replied the pilgrim, according to that which God hath revealed unto me, Tedaldo is nowise dead, but alive and well and in good case, so but he had your favor. Quoth the lady, Look what you say. I saw him dead before my door of several knife thrusts, and had him in these arms, and bathed his dead face with many tears, the which it may be gave occasion for that which hath been spoken thereof unseemly. Madam, replied the pilgrim, whatever you may say, I certify you that Tedaldo is alive, and if you will e'en promise me that with intent to fulfill your promise, I hope you shall soon see him. Quoth she, That do I promise and will gladly perform, nor could aught betide that would afford me such content as to see my husband free and unharmed and Tedaldo alive. Thereupon it seemed to Tedaldo time to discover himself and to comfort the lady with more certain hope of her husband, and accordingly he said, Madam, in order that I may comfort you for your husband, it behoveth me reveal to you a secret, which look you discover not unto any, as you value your life. Now they were in a very retired place and alone, the lady having conceived the utmost confidence of the sanctity which her seemed was in the pilgrim, wherefore Tedaldo, pulling out a ring, which she had given him the last night he had been with her, and which he had kept with the utmost diligence, and showing it to her, said, Madam, know you this? As soon as she saw it, she recognized it and answered, Aye, sir, I gave it to Tedaldo aforetime. Whereupon the pilgrim, rising to his feet, hastily cast off his palmer's gown and hat, and speaking Florence fashion, said, And know you me? When the lady saw this, she knew him to be Tedaldo and was all aghast, fearing him as one feareth the dead, and they be seen after death to go as if alive. Wherefore she made not towards him to welcome him as Tedaldo returned from Cyprus, but would have fled from him in a fright, as he were Tedaldo come back from the tomb. Whereupon, Madam, quoth he, Fear not, I am your Tedaldo alive and well, and have never died nor been slain, whatsoever you and my brothers may believe. The lady, somewhat reassured and knowing his voice, considered him a while longer and avouched in herself that he was certainly Tedaldo. Wherefore she threw herself, weeping, on his neck and kissed him, saying, "Welcome back, sweet my Tedaldo." Tedaldo, having kissed and embraced her, said, "Madam, it is no time now for closer greetings. I must e'en go take order that Aldobrandino may be restored to you safe and sound. Whereof I hope that, ere tomorrow come eventide, you shall hear news that will please you. Nay, if, as I expect, I have good news of his safety, I trust this night to be able to come to you and report them to you at more leisure than I can at this present." Then, donning his gown and hat again, he kissed the lady once more and bidding her be of good hope, took leave of her and repaired whereas Aldobrandino lay in prison, occupied more with fear of imminent death than with hopes of deliverance to come. Tedaldo, with the jailer's consent, went in to him in the guise of a ghostly comforter, and seating himself by his side, said to him, "Aldobrandino, I am a friend of thine, sent thee for thy deliverance by God, who hath taken pity on thee because of thine innocence. Wherefore, if in reverence to him thou wilt grant me a little boon that I shall ask of thee, thou shalt without fail, ere tomorrow be night, whereas thou lookest for sentence of death, hear that of thine acquittance." "Honest man," replied the prisoner, "since thou art solicitous of my deliverance, albeit I know thee not nor mind me ever to have seen thee, needs must thou be a friend, as thou say'st. In truth, the sin, for which they say I am to be doomed to death, I never committed, though others enough have I committed aforetime, which, it may be, have brought me to this pass. But this I say to thee, of reverence to God. And he presently have compassion on me, I will not only promise, but gladly do anything, however great, to say nothing of a little one. Wherefore ask that which pleaseth thee, for without fail, if it come to pass that I escape with life, I will punctually perform it." Then said the pilgrim, "What I would have of thee is that thou pardon Tedaldo's 4 brothers the having brought thee to this pass, believing thee guilty of their brother's death, and have them again for brethren and for friends, weenas they crave the pardon thereof." Whereto quoth Aldobrandino, "None knoweth but he who hath suffered the affront how sweet a thing is vengeance, and with what ardor it is desired. Nevertheless, so God may apply himself to my deliverance, I will freely pardon them. Nay, I pardon them now, and if I come off hence alive and escape, I will in this hold such course as shall be to thy liking." This pleased the pilgrim, and without concerning himself to say more to him, he exhorted him to be of good heart, for that, ere the ensuing day came to an end, he should without fail hear very certain news of his safety. Then, taking leave of him, he repaired to the seigneury and said privily to a gentleman who was in session there, "My lord, everyone should gladly labor to bring to light the truth of things, and especially those who hold such a room as this of yours, to the end that those may not suffer the penalty who have not committed the crime, and that the guilty may be punished, that which may be brought about. To your honor and the bane of those who have merited it, I am come hither to you. As you know, you have rigorously proceeded against Aldobrandino Palermini, and thinking you have found for truth that it was he who slew Tedaldo Elysei, are minded to condemn him. But this is most certainly false, as I doubt not to show you, ere midnight betide, by giving into your hands the murderers of the young man in question." The worthy gentleman, who was in concern for Aldobrandino, willingly gave ear to the pilgrim's words, and having conferred at large with him upon the matter, on his information, took the 2 innkeeper brothers and their servant, without resistance, in their first sleep. He would have put them to the question, to discover how the case stood. But they brooked it not, and each first for himself, and after all together, openly confessed that it was they who had slain Tedaldo Elysei, knowing him not. Being questioned of the case, they said that it was, for that he had given the wife of one of them sore annoy, what while they were abroad, and would fain have enforced her to do his will. The pilgrim, having heard this, with the magistrate's consent took his leave, and repairing privily to the house of Madame Ermelina, found her alone and awaiting him, all else in the house being gone to sleep, alike desirous of having good news of her husband and of fully reconciling herself with her Tedaldo. He accosted her with a joyful countenance and said, "Dearest lady mine, be of good cheer, for tomorrow thou shalt certainly have thine Aldobrandino here again safe and sound." And to give her more entire assurance thereof, he fully recounted to her that which he had done. Whereupon she, glad as ever woman was of 2 so sudden and so happy chances, to wit, the having her lover alive again, whom she verily believed to have bewept dead, and the seeing Aldobrandino free from peril, whose death she looked ere many days to have to mourn, affectionately embraced and kissed Tedaldo. Then, getting them to bed together, with one accord they made a glad and gracious peace, taking delight and joyance one of the other. Whenas the day drew near, Tedaldo arose, after showing the lady that which he purposed to do and praying her anew to keep it a close secret, and went forth, even in his pilgrim's habit, to attend, whenas it should be time, to Aldobrandino's affairs. The day come, it appearing to the seigneury that they had full information of the matter, they straightway discharged Aldobrandino, and a few days after let strike off the murderers' heads, whereas they had committed the crime. Aldobrandino being now, to the great joy of himself and his wife, and of all his friends and kinsfolk, free and manifestly acknowledging that he owed his deliverance to the good offices of the pilgrim, carried the latter to his house for such time as it pleased him to sojourn in the city. And there they could not sate themselves of doing him honor and worship, especially the lady, who knew with whom she had to do. After a while, deeming it time to bring his brothers to an accord with Aldobrandino, and knowing that they were not only put to shame by the latter's acquittance, but went armed for fear of his resentment, he demanded of his host the fulfillment of his promise. Aldobrandino freely answered that he was ready, whereupon the pilgrim caused him prepare against the morrow a goodly banquet, whereat he told him he would have him and his kinsmen and kinswomen entertain the four brothers and their ladies, adding that he himself would go incontinent and bid the latter on his part to peace and his banquet. Aldobrandino consenting to all that liked the pilgrim, the latter forthright betook himself to the four brothers, and plying them with store of such words as behoved unto the matter, in fine, with irrepugnable arguments, brought them easily enough to consent to regain Aldobrandino's friendship by asking pardon. Which done, he invited them and their ladies to dinner with Aldobrandino next morning, and they, being certified of his good faith, frankly accepted the invitation. Accordingly, on the morrow, towards dinner time, Tedaldo's four brothers, clad all in black as they were, came, with sundry of their friends, to the house of Aldobrandino, who stayed for them, and there, in the presence of all who had been bidden of him to bear them company, cast down their arms and committed themselves to his mercy, craving forgiveness of that which they had wrought against him. Aldobrandino, weeping, received them affectionately, and kissing them all on the mouth, dispatched the matter in a few words, remitting unto them every injury received. After them came their wives and sisters, clad all in sad-colored raiment, and were graciously received by Madame Ermelina and the other ladies. Then were all, ladies and men alike, magnificently entertained at the banquet, nor was there aught in the entertainment other than commendable, except it were the taciturnity occasioned by the yet fresh sorrow expressed in the somber raiment of Tedaldo's kinsfolk. Now on this account the pilgrim's device of the banquet had been blamed of some, and he had observed it. Wherefore, the time being come to do away with the constraint aforesaid, he rose to his feet, according as he had foreordained in himself, what while the rest still ate of the fruits, and said, Nothing hath lacked to this entertainment that should make it joyful, save only Tedaldo himself, whom, since having had him continually with you, you have not known him, I will e'en discover to you. So saying, he cast off his palmer's gown, and all other his pilgrim's weeds, and abiding in a jerkin of green sendal, was with no little amazement, long-eyed and considered of all, ere any would venture to believe it was indeed he. Tedaldo, seeing this, recounted many particulars of the relations and things betided between them, as well as of his own adventures. Whereupon his brethren and the other gentlemen present ran all to embrace him, with eyes full of joyful tears, as after did the ladies on like wise, as well strangers as kinswomen, except only Madame Ermelina. Which Aldobrandino seeing, What is this, Ermelina? Quoth he. Why dost thou not welcome Tedaldo, as do the other ladies? Whereto she answered, in the hearing of all, There is none who had more gladly welcomed, and would yet welcome him than myself, who am more beholden to him than any other woman, seeing that by his means I have got thee again. But the unseemly words spoken in the days when we mourned him, whom we deemed Tedaldo, made me refrain therefrom. Quoth her husband, Go to, thinkest thou I believe in the howlers? He hath right well shown their prate to be false by procuring my deliverance, more by token that I never believed it. Quick, rise and go and embrace him. The lady, who desired nothing better, was not slow to obey her husband in this, and accordingly, arising, embraced Tedaldo, as the other ladies had done, and gave him joyous welcome. This liberality of Aldobrandino was mighty pleasing to Tedaldo's brothers, and to every man and woman there, and thereby all suspect that had been aroused in the minds of some by the words aforesaid was done away. Then, everyone having given Tedaldo joy, he with his own hands rent the black clothes on his brothers' backs, and the sad-colored on those of his sisters and kinswomen, and would have them send after other apparel, which weenas they had donned. They gave themselves to singing and dancing and other diversions galore. Wherefore the banquet, which had had a silent beginning, had a loud resounding ending. Thereafter, with the utmost mirth, they one and all repaired, even as they were, to Tedaldo's house, where they supped that night, and on this wise they continued to feast several days longer. Footnote 189, lit. Despite rancor, rugganaza. But the phrase appears to refer to the suspicions excited by the whispers that had been current, as above mentioned, of the connection between Ermelina and Tedaldo. The Florentines a while regarded Tedaldo with amazement, as a man risen from the dead. Nay, in many in one's mind, and even in that of his brethren, there abode a certain faint doubt and he were indeed himself, and they did not yet thoroughly believe it, nor belike had they believed it for a long time to come, but for a chance which made them clear who the murdered man was, which was on this wise. There passed one day before their house certain footmen of Lunigiana, who, seeing Tedaldo, made towards him and said, "Give you good day, Faziuolo." Whereto Tedaldo in his brother's presence answered, "You mistake me." The others, hearing him speak, were abashed and cried him pardon, saying, "Forsooth you resemble, more than ever we saw one man favor another, a comrade of ours called Faziuolo of Pontremoli, who came hither some fortnight or more agone, nor could we ever since learn what is come of him. Indeed, we marveled at the dress, for that he was a soldier, even as we are." Tedaldo's elder brother, hearing this, came forward and inquired how this Faziuolo had been clad. They told him, and it was found to have been punctually as they said. Wherefore, what with these and what with other tokens, it was known for certain that he who had been slain was Faziuolo, and not Tedaldo, and all doubt of the latter accordingly departed his brothers and of every other. Tedaldo then, being returned very rich, persevered in his love, and the lady falling out with him no more, they long, discreetly dealing, had enjoyment of their love. God grant us to enjoy ours. The 8th story. Frondo, having swallowed a certain powder, is entombed for dead and being taken forth of the sepulchre by the abbot, who enjoyeth his wife the while, is put in prison and given to believe that he is in purgatory. After which, being raised up again, he reth for his own a child begotten of the abbot on his wife. The end being come of Emilia's long story, which had not withal for its length been unpleasing to any of the company, nay, but was held of all the ladies to have been briefly narrated. Having regard to the number and diversity of the incidents therein recounted, the queen, having with a mere sign intimated her pleasure to Loretta, gave her occasion to begin thus. Dearest ladies, there occurreth to me to tell you a true story, which hath much more semblance of falsehood than of that which it indeed is, and which hath been recalled to my mind by hearing one to have been bewept and buried for another. I purpose, then, to tell you how a live man was entombed for dead, and how after he and many other folk believed himself to have come forth of the sepulchre as one raised from the dead, by reason whereof he was adored as a saint, who should rather have been condemned as a criminal. Footnote 192, i.e. the abbot who played the trick upon Ferrando. See post. There was then, and yet is, in Tuscany, an abbey situate, like as we see many thereof, in a place not overmuch frequented of men, whereof a monk was made abbot, who was a very holy man in everything, save in the matter of women. And in this he contrived to do so warily that well nigh none, not to say knew, but even suspected him thereof, for that he was holden exceeding godly, and just in everything. It chanced that a very wealthy farmer, by name Ferrando, contracted a great intimacy with him, a heavy, clodpate fellow and dull-witted beyond measure, whose commerce pleased the abbot, but for that his simplicity whiles afforded him some diversion. And in the course of their acquaintance, the latter perceived that Ferrando had a very handsome woman to wife, of whom he became so passionately enamored that he thought of nothing else day or night. But hearing that, simple and shallow-witted as Ferrando was in everything else, he was shrewd enough in the matter of loving and guarding his wife. He well-nigh despaired of her. However, like a very adroit man as he was, he wrought on such wise with Ferrando that he came whiles, with his wife, to take his pleasance in the abbey garden. And there he very demurely entertained them with discourse of the beatitude of the life eternal, and of the pious works of many men and women of times past, insomuch that the lady was taken with a desire to confess herself to him, and asked, and had Ferrando's leave thereof. Accordingly, to the abbot's exceeding pleasure, she came to confess to him, and seating herself at his feet, before she proceeded to say otherwhat, began thus: Sir, if God had given me a right husband or had given me none, it would belike be easy to me, with the help of your exhortations, to enter upon the road which you say leadeth folk unto life eternal. But I, having regard to what Ferrando is, and to his witlessness, may style myself a widow, and yet am married, inasmuch as, he living, I can have no other husband. And dolt as he is without any cause, so out of all measure jealous of me, that by reason thereof I cannot live with him otherwise than in tribulation and misery. Wherefore, ere I come to other confession, I humbly beseech you, as most I may, that it may please you give me some counsel concerning this. For that, and the occasion of my well-doing begin not therefrom, confession or other good work will profit me little. This speech gave the abbot great satisfaction, and him seemed fortune had opened him the way to his chief desire. Wherefore, daughter, quoth he, I can well believe that it must be a sore annoy for a fair and dainty dame such as you are to have a blockhead to husband, but a much greater meseemeth to have a jealous man. Wherefore, you having both the one and the other, I can lightly credit that which you avouch of your tribulation. But for this, speaking briefly, I see neither counsel nor remedy save one, the which is that Ferrando be cured of this jealousy. The medicine that will cure him I know very well how to make, provided you have the heart to keep secret that which I shall tell you. Father mine, answered the lady, have no fear of that, for I would liefer suffer death than tell any that which you bid me not repeat. But how may this be done? Quoth the abbot, and we would have him cured, it behoveth of necessity that he go to purgatory. But how, asked she, can he go thither alive? Needs must he die, replied the abbot, and so go thither, and weenas he shall have suffered such penance as shall suffice to purge him of his jealousy, we will pray God, with certain orisons that he restore him to this life, and he will do it. Then, said the lady, I am to become a widow. I, answered the abbot, for a certain time, wherein you must look well you suffer not yourself to be married again, for that God would take it in ill part, and weenas Ferrando returned hither, it would behove you return to him, and he would then be more jealous than ever. Quoth she, provided he be but cured of this calamity, so it may not behove me abide in prison all my life, I am content, do as it pleaseth you. And I will do it, rejoined he, but what guerdon am I to have of you for such a service? Father, answered the lady, you shall have whatsoever pleaseth you, so but it be in my power. But what can the like of me that may befit such a man as yourself? Madam, replied the abbot, you can do no less for me than that which I undertake to do for you. For that, like as I am disposed to do that which is to be your weal and your solacement, even so can you do that which will be the saving and assainment of my life. Quoth she, and it be so, I am ready. Then, said the abbot, you must give me your love and vouchsafe me satisfaction of yourself, for whom I am all afire with love and languishment. The lady, hearing this, was all aghast and answered, Alack, father mine, what is this you ask? Methought you were a saint. Doth it beseem holy men to require women, who come to them for counsel, of such things? Fair my soul, rejoined the abbot, marvel not, for that sanctity nowise abateth by this, seeing it hath its seat in the soul, and that which I ask of you is a sin of the body. But be that as it may, your ravishing beauty hath had such might that love constraineth me to do thus. And I tell you that you may glory in your charms over all other women, considering that they please holy men, who are used to look upon the beauties of heaven. Moreover, abbot though I be, I am a man like another, and am, as you see, not yet old. Nor should this that I ask be grievous to you to do. Nay, you should rather desire it, for that, what while Ferrando sojourneth in purgatory, I will bear you company by night, and render you that solacement which he should give you. Nor shall any ever come to know of this, for that every one believeth of me that, and more than that, which you but now believed of me. Reject not the grace that God sendeth you, for there be women enough who covet that which you may have and shall have, if, like a wise woman, you hearken to my counsel. Moreover, I have fair and precious jewels, which I purpose shall belong to none other than yourself. Do then for me, sweet my hope, that which I willingly do for you. The lady hung her head, knowing not how to deny him, whilst her seemed it were ill done to grant him what he asked. But the abbot, seeing that she hearkened, and hesitated to reply, and him seeming he had already half converted her, followed up his first words with many others, and stayed, not till he had persuaded her that she would do well to comply with him. Accordingly, she said, blushing, that she was ready to do his every commandment, but might not avail thereto till such time as Ferrando should be gone to purgatory. Whereupon quoth the abbot, exceeding well pleased, and we will make shift to send him thither incontinent. Do you but contrive that he come hither tomorrow or next day to sojourn with me. So saying, he privily put a very handsome ring into her hand and dismissed her. The lady rejoiced at the gift, and looking to have others, rejoined her companions, to whom she fell to relating marvelous things of the abbot's sanctity, and presently returned home with them. A few days after Ferrando repaired to the abbey, whom, weenas the abbot saw, he cast about to send him to purgatory. Accordingly, he sought out a powder of marvelous virtue, which he had gotten in the parts of the Levant of a great prince, who avouched it to be that which was wont to be used of the old man of the mountain, weenas he would fain send anyone, sleeping, into his paradise or bring him forth thereof. And that, according as more or less thereof was given, without doing any hurt, it made him who took it sleep more or less on such wise that, whilst its virtue lasted, none would say he had life in him. Of this he took as much as might suffice to make a man sleep 3 days, and putting it in a beaker of wine, that was not yet well cleared, gave it to Ferrando to drink in his cell, without the latter suspecting aught. After which he carried him into the cloister, and there with some of his monks fell to making sport of him and his dunceries. Nor was it long before, the powder working, Ferrando was taken with so sudden and overpowering a drowsiness, that he slumbered as yet he stood afoot, and presently fell down fast asleep. Footnote 194. The well-known chief of the assassins, properly Heshishin, i.e. hashish or hemp-eaters. The powder in question is apparently a preparation of hashish or hemp. Boccaccio seems to have taken his idea of the old man of the mountain from Marco Polo, whose travels, published in the early part of the 14th century, give a most romantic account of that chieftain and his followers. The abbot made a show of being concerned at this accident, and letting untruss him, caused fetch cold water and cast it in his face, and essay many other remedies of his fashion, as if he would recall the strayed life and senses from some fumosity of the stomach, or what not like affection that had usurped them. The monks, seeing that for all this he came not to himself and feeling his pulse, but finding no sign of life in him, all held it for certain that he was dead. Accordingly, they sent to tell his wife and his kinsfolk, who all came thither forthright, and the lady having bewept him a while with her kinswomen, the abbot caused lay him, clad as he was, in a tomb. Whilst the lady returned to her house, and giving out that she meant never to part from a little son, whom she had had by her husband, abode at home, and occupied herself with the governance of the child, and of the wealth which had been Ferrando's. Meanwhile, the abbot arose stealthily in the night, and with the aid of a Bolognese monk, in whom he much trusted, and who was that day come thither from Bologna, took up Ferrando out of the tomb, and carried him into a vault, in which there was no light to be seen, and which had been made for prison of such of the monks as should make default in aught. There they pulled off his garments, and clothing him monk fashion, laid him on a truss of straw, and there left him against he should recover his senses, whilst the Bolognese monk, having been instructed by the abbot of that which he had to do, without any else knowing aught thereof, proceeded to await his coming to himself. On the morrow, the abbot, accompanied by sundry of his monks, betook himself, by way of visitation, to the house of the lady, whom he found clad in black and in great tribulation, and having comforted her a while, he softly required her of her promise. The lady, finding herself free and unhindered of Ferrando or any other, and seeing on his finger another fine ring, replied that she was ready, and appointed him to come to her that same night. Accordingly, night come, the abbot, disguised in Ferrando's clothes and accompanied by the monk his confidant, repaired thither and lay with her in the utmost delight and pleasance till the morning, when he returned to the abbey. After this he very often made the same journey on a like errand, and being whiles encountered, coming or going, of one or another of the villagers, it was believed he was Ferrando who went about those parts, doing penance, by reason whereof many strange stories were after bruited about among the simple countryfolk, and this was more than once reported to Ferrando's wife, who well knew what it was. As for Ferrando, when he recovered his senses and found himself he knew not where, the Bolognese monk came in to him with a horrible noise and laying hold of him, gave him a sound drubbing with a rod he had in his hand. Ferrando, weeping and crying out, did not but ask, "Where am I?" To which the monk answered, "Thou art in purgatory." "How?" cried Ferrando. "Am I then dead?" "Aye, certes," replied the other. Whereupon Ferrando fell to bemoaning himself and his wife and child, saying the oddest things in the world. Presently the monk brought him somewhat of meat and drink, which Ferrando seeing, "What?" cried he. "Do the dead eat?" "Aye do they," answered the monk. "This that I bring thee is what the woman, thy wife that was, sent this morning to the church to let say masses for thy soul, and God the Lord willeth that it be made over to thee." Quoth Ferrando, "God grant her a good year. I still cherished her ere I died, insomuch that I held her all night in mine arms and did not but kiss her, and other thing also I did, when I had a mind thereto." Then, being very sharp-set, he fell to eating and drinking, and him seeming the wine was not overgood. "Lord confound her," quoth he. "Why did not she give the priest wine of the cask against the wall?" After he had eaten, the monk laid hold of him anew and gave him another sound beating with the same rod, whereat Ferrando roared out lustily and said, "Alack, why dost thou this to me?" Quoth the monk, "Because thus hath God the Lord ordained that it be done unto thee twice every day." "And for what cause?" asked Ferrando. "Because," answered the monk, "thou wast jealous, having the best woman in the country to wife." "Alas," said Ferrando, "thou say'st sooth, I and the kindest creature, she was sweeter than syrup, but I knew not that God the Lord held it for ill that a man should be jealous, else had I not been so." Quoth the monk, "Thou shouldst have bethought thyself of that, weenas thou wast there below, and have amended thee thereof, and should it betide that thou ever return thither, look thou so have in mind that which I do unto thee at this present, that thou be never more jealous." "What?" said Ferrando. "Do the dead ever return thither?" "Aye," answered the monk, "whom God willeth." "Marry," cried Ferrando, "and I ever return thither, I will be the best husband in the world. I will never beat her nor give her an ill word, except it be anent the wine she sent hither this morning, and for that she sent no candles, so it behoved me to eat in the dark." "Nay," said the monk, "she sent candles enough, but they were all burnt for the masses." "True," rejoined Ferrando, "and assuredly, an I return thither, I will let her do what she will." "But tell me, who art thou that usest me thus?" Quoth the monk, "I also am dead. I was of Sardinia, and for that aforetime I much commended a master of mine of being jealous. I have been doomed of God to this punishment, that I must give thee to eat and drink and beat thee thus, till such time as God shall ordain otherwhat of thee and of me." Then said Ferrando, "Is there none here other than we twain?" "Aye," answered the monk, "there be folk by the thousands, but thou canst neither see nor hear them, nor they thee." Quoth Ferrando, "And how far are we from our own countries?" "Ecode," replied the other, "we are distant thence more miles than we can well cack it about." "Faith," rejoined the farmer, "that is far enough, meseemeth we must be out of the world, and it be so much as all that." In such and the like discourse was Ferrando entertained 60 months with eating and drinking and beating, what while the abbot assiduously visited the fair lady, without miscarriage, and gave himself the goodliest time in the world with her. At last, as ill luck would have it, the lady found herself with child and straightway acquainted the abbot therewith. Wherefore it seemed well to them both that Ferrando should without delay be recalled from purgatory to life and return to her, so she might avouch herself with child by him. Accordingly, the abbot that same night caused call to Ferrando in prison with a counterfeit voice, saying, "Ferrando, take comfort, for it is God's pleasure that thou return to the world, where thou shalt have a son by thy wife, whom look thou name Benedict, for that by the prayers of thy holy abbot and of thy wife, and for the love of Saint Benedict he doth thee this favor." Ferrando, hearing this, was exceedingly rejoiced and said, "It liketh me well, Lord grant a good year to Saint God Almighty, and to the abbot and Saint Benedict and my cheesy sweet honey wife." The abbot let give him, in the wine that he sent him, so much of the powder aforesaid as should cause him sleep maybe 4 hours, and with the aid of his monk, having put his own clothes on him, restored him privily to the tomb wherein he had been buried. Footnote 196. Sic Cassiata, meaning that he loves her as well as he loves cheese, for which it is well known that the lower-class Italian has a romantic passion. According to Alexander Dumas, the Italian loves cheese so well that he has succeeded in introducing it into everything he eats or drinks, with the one exception of coffee. Next morning, at break of day, Ferrando came to himself and espying light, a thing which he had not seen for good 10 months, through some crevice of the tomb, doubted not but he was alive again. Accordingly he fell to bawling out, "Open to me! Open to me!" and heaving so lustily at the lid of the tomb with his head that he stirred it, for that it was eath to move, and had begun to move it away, when the monks, having now made an end of saying matins, ran thither and knew Ferrando's voice and saw him in act to come forth of the sepulchre. Whereupon, all aghast for the strangeness of the case, they took to their heels and ran to the abbot, who made a show of rising from prayer and said, "My sons, have no fear. Take the cross and the holy water and follow after me, so we may see that which God willeth to show forth to us of his might." And as he said, so he did. Now Ferrando was come forth of the sepulchre all pale, as well might he be who had so long abidden without seeing the sky. As soon as he saw the abbot, he ran to cast himself at his feet and said, "Father mine, according to that which hath been revealed to me, your prayers and those of Saint Benedict and my wife have delivered me from the pains of purgatory and restored me to life, wherefore I pray God to give you a good year and good calends now and always." Quoth the abbot, "Praised be God his might. Go, my son, since he hath sent thee back hither, comfort thy wife, who hath been still in tears since thou departedst this life, and henceforth be a friend and servant of God." "Sir," replied Ferrando, "so hath it indeed been said to me. Only leave me do, for, as soon as I find her, I shall buss her, such good will do I bear her." The abbot, left alone with his monks, made a great show of wonderment at this miracle, and caused devoutly sing miserere therefore. As for Ferrando, he returned to his village, where all who saw him fled, as men used to do from things frightful. But he called them back and avouched himself to be raised up again. His wife on like wise feigned to be adread of him. But after the folk were somewhat reassured anent him, and saw that he was indeed alive, they questioned him of many things. And he, as it were he had returned wise, made answer to all and gave them news of the souls of their kinsfolk, making up, of his own motion, the finest fables in the world of the affairs of purgatory and recounting in full assembly the revelation made him by the mouth of the angel Bragil ere he was raised up again. Then, returning to his house and entering again into possession of his goods, he got his wife, as he thought, with child, and by chance it befell that, in due time to the thinking of the fools who believe that women go just 9 months with child, the lady gave birth to a boy, who was called Benedict Ferrandi. Footnote 198. The plural of a surname is in strictness always used by the Italians in speaking of a man by his full name, de being understood between the Christian and surname, as Benedetto dei Ferrandi, Benedict of the Ferrandos or Ferrando family, whilst when he is denominated by the surname alone, it is used in the singular, il, the being understood, e.g. il Boccaccio, il Ferrando, i.e., the particular Boccaccio or Ferrando in question for the nonce. Ferrando's return and his talk, well nigh every one believing him to have risen from the dead, added infinitely to the renown of the abbot's sanctity, and he himself, as if cured of his jealousy by the many beatings he had received therefor, thenceforward, according to the promise made by the abbot to the lady, was no more jealous. Whereat she was well pleased and lived honestly with him, as of her wont, save indeed that, ween as she conveniently might, she willingly foregathered with the holy abbot, who had so well and diligently served her in her greatest needs. The 9th story. Giallittede Narbunani, Arisiovrth, the king of France of a fistula, and Diamandith, for her husband Beartirandita Rouselin, who marith her against his will, and betaketh him for despite to Florence, where, he paying court to young lady, Giallittete, in the person of the latter, lieth with him and him 2 sons. Wherefore after, holding her dear, he entrartianith her for his wife. Loretta's story being now ended, It rested but with the queen to tell, and she would not infringe upon Dionio's privilege. Wherefore, without waiting to be solicited by her companions, she began all blithesomely to speak thus. Who shall tell a story that may appear goodly, now we have heard that of Loretta? Certes, it was well for us that hers was not the first, for that few of the others would have pleased after it, as I misdoubt me will betide of those which are yet to tell this day. Nathless, be that as it may, I will e'en recount to you that which occurreth to me upon the proposed theme. Footnote 199, lit. And so I hope, sparrow. A curious instance of the ancient Dantesque use of the word sparrow, I hope, in its contrary sense of fear. There was in the kingdom of France a gentleman called Isnard, Count of Roussillon, who, for that he was scant of health, still entertained about his person a physician, by name Master Gerard de Narbonne. The said count had one little son, and no more, hight Bertrand, who was exceeding handsome and agreeable, and with him other children of his own age were brought up. Among these latter was a daughter of the aforesaid physician, by name Gillette, who vowed to the said Bertrand an infinite love and fervent more than pertained unto her tender years. The count dying and leaving his son in the hands of the king, it behoved him betake himself to Paris, whereof the damsel abode sore disconsolate, and her own father dying no great while after, she would fain, and she might have had a seemly occasion, have gone to Paris to see Bertrand. But being straitly guarded, for that she was left rich and alone, she saw no honorable way thereto. And being now of age for a husband, and having never been able to forget Bertrand, she had, without reason assigned, refused many to whom her kinsfolk would have married her. Now it befell that, what while she burned more than ever for love of Bertrand, for that she heard he was grown a very goodly gentleman, news came to her how the king of France, by an imposthume which he had had in his breast and which had been ill tended, had gotten a fistula, which occasioned him the utmost anguish and annoy, nor had he yet been able to find a physician who might avail to recover him thereof, albeit many had essayed it, but all had aggravated the ill. Wherefore the king, despairing of cure, would have no more counsel nor aid of any. Hereof the young lady was beyond measure content, and bethought herself that not only would this furnish her with a legitimate occasion of going to Paris, but that, should the king's ailment be such as she believed, she might lightly avail to have Bertrand to husband. Accordingly, having aforetime learned many things of her father, she made a powder of certain simples useful for such an infirmity as she conceived the king's to be, and taking horse, repaired to Paris. Before aught else she studied to see Bertrand, and next, presenting herself before the king, she prayed him of his favor to show her his ailment. The king, seeing her a fair and engaging damsel, knew not how to deny her, and showed her that which ailed him. Ween as she saw it, she was certified incontinent that she could heal it, and accordingly said, My lord, and it please you, I hope in God to make you whole of this your infirmity in 8 days' time, without annoy or fatigue on your part. The king scoffed in himself at her words, saying, That which the best physicians in the world have availed not neither known to do, how shall a young woman know? Accordingly, he thanked her for her good will, and answered that he was resolved no more to follow the counsel of physicians. Whereupon quoth the damsel, My lord, you make light of my skill, for that I am young and a woman. But I would have you bear in mind that I medicine not of mine own science, but with the aid of God and the science of Master Gerard de Narbonne, who was my father and a famous physician whilst he lived. The king, hearing this, said in himself, It may be this woman is sent me of God. Why should I not make proof of her knowledge, since she saith she will, without annoy of mine, cure me in little time? Accordingly, being resolved to assay her, he said, Damsel, and if you cure us not, after causing us break our resolution, what will you have ensue to you therefore? My lord, answered she, set a guard upon me, and if I cure you not within 8 days, let burn me alive. But if cure you, what reward shall I have? Quoth the king, You seem as yet unhusbanded. If you do this, we will marry you well and worshipfully. My lord, replied the young lady, I am well pleased that you should marry me, but I will have a husband such as I shall ask of you, excepting always any one of your sons or of the royal house. He readily promised her that which she sought, whereupon she began her cure, and in brief, before the term limited, she brought him back to health. The king, feeling himself healed, said, Damsel, you have well earned your husband. Whereto she answered, Then, my lord, I have earned Bertrand de Roussillon, whom I began to love even in the days of my childhood and have ever since loved over all." The king deemed it a grave matter to give him to her. Nevertheless, having promised her and unwilling to fail of his faith, he let call the count to himself and bespoke him thus: "Bertrand, you are now of age and accomplished in all that behoveth unto man's estate. Wherefore it is our pleasure that you return to govern your county and carry with you a damsel, whom we have given you to wife." "And who is the damsel, my lord?" asked Bertrand, to which the king answered, "It is she who hath with her medicines restored to us our health." Footnote 200. Fornido, a notable example of what the illustrious Lewis Carroll Dodgson, Waywode of Wonderland, calls a portmanteau word, a species that abounds in medieval Italian for the confusion of translators. Bertrand, who had seen and recognized Gillette, knowing her, albeit she seemed to him very fair, to be of no such lineage as sorted with his quality, said all disdainfully, "My lord, will you then marry me to a shillich? Now God forbid I should ever take such an one to wife." "Then," said the king, "will you have us fail of our faith, the which to have our health again, we pledge to the damsel, who in guerdon thereof demanded you to husband?" "My lord," answered Bertrand, "you may, and you will, take from me whatsoever I possess, or, as your liegeman, bestow me upon whoso pleaseth you. But of this I certify you, that I will never be a consenting party unto such a marriage." "Nay," rejoined the king, "but you shall, for that the damsel is fair and wise and loveth you dear, wherefore we doubt not but you will have a far happier life with her than with a lady of higher lineage." Bertrand held his peace, and the king let make great preparations for the celebration of the marriage. The appointed day being come, Bertrand, sore against his will in the presence of the king, espoused the damsel, who loved him more than herself. This done, having already determined in himself what he should do, he sought leave of the king to depart, saying he would fain return to his county and there consummate the marriage. Then, taking horse, he repaired not thither, but betook himself into Tuscany, where, hearing that the Florentines were at war with those of Siena, he determined to join himself to the former, by whom he was joyfully received and made captain over a certain number of men at arms. And there, being well provided of them, he abode a pretty while in their service. Footnote 201, i.e. getting good pay and allowances, avendo buona provision. The newly made wife, ill content with such a lot, but hoping by her fair dealing to recall him to his county, betook herself to Roussillon, where she was received of all as their liege lady. There, finding everything waste and disordered for the long time that the land had been without a lord, with great diligence and solicitude, like a discreet lady as she was, she set all in order again, whereof the count's vassals were mightily content and held her exceeding dear, vowing her a great love and blaming the count sore for that he accepted not of her. The lady, having thoroughly ordered the county, notified the count thereof by 2 knights, whom she dispatched to him, praying him that, and it were on her account he forbore to come to his county, he should signify it to her, and she, to pleasure him, would depart thence. But he answered them very harshly, saying, for that, let her do her pleasure. I, for my part, will return thither to abide with her, weenas she shall have this my ring on her finger, and in her arms a son by me begotten. Now the ring in question he held very dear, and never parted with it, by reason of a certain virtue which it had been given him to understand that it had. The knights understood the hardship of the condition implied in these 2 well-nigh impossible requirements, but seeing that they might not by their words avail to move him from his purpose, they returned to the lady and reported to her his reply. Whereat she was sore afflicted and determined, after long consideration, to seek to learn if and where the 2 things aforesaid might be compassed, to the intent that she might, in consequence, have her husband again. Accordingly, having bethought herself what she should do, she assembled certain of the best and chiefest men of the county, and with plaintive speech very orderly recounted to them that which she had already done for love of the count, and showed them what had ensued thereof, adding that it was not her intent that, through her sojourn there, the count should abide in perpetual exile. Nay, rather she purposed to spend the rest of her life in pilgrimages and works of mercy and charity for her soul's health. Wherefore she prayed them take the ward and governance of the county, and notify the count that she had left him free and vacant possession, and had departed the country, intending never more to return to Roussillon. Many were the tears shed by the good folk, whilst she spoke, and many the prayers addressed to her that it would please her change counsel and abide there, but they availed not. Then commending them to God, she set out upon her way without telling any whither she was bound, well furnished with moneys and jewels of price, and accompanied by a cousin of hers and a chamberwoman, all in pilgrim's habits, and stayed not till she came to Florence, where, chancing upon a little inn kept by a decent widow woman, she there took up her abode and lived quietly, after the fashion of a poor pilgrim, impatient to hear news of her lord. It befell then that on the morrow of her arrival she saw Bertrand pass before her lodging, a horseback with his company, and albeit she knew him full well, nathless, she asked the good woman of the inn who he was. The hostess answered, "That is a stranger gentleman, who calleth himself Count Bertrand, a pleasant man and a courteous and much loved in the city. And he is the most enamored man in the world of a she-neighbor of ours, who is a gentlewoman, but poor. Sooth to say, she is a very virtuous damsel and abideth, being yet unmarried for poverty, with her mother, a very good and discreet lady, but for whom, maybe, she had already done the Count's pleasure." The Countess took good note of what she heard, and having more closely inquired into every particular and apprehended all aright, determined in herself how she should do. Accordingly, having learned the house and name of the lady whose daughter the Count loved, she one day repaired privily thither in her pilgrim's habit, and finding the mother and daughter in very poor case, saluted them, and told the former that, an it pleased her, she would fain speak with her alone. The gentlewoman, rising, replied that she was ready to hearken to her, and accordingly carried her into a chamber of hers, where they seated themselves, and the Countess began thus: "Madam, meseemeth you are of the enemies of fortune, even as I am, but an you will, belike you may be able to relieve both yourself and me." The lady answered that she desired nothing better than to relieve herself by any honest means, and the Countess went on, "Needs must you pledge me your faith, whereto an I commit myself and you deceive me, you will mar your own affairs and mine." "Tell me anything you will in all assurance," replied the gentlewoman, "for never shall you find yourself deceived of me." Thereupon the Countess, beginning with her first enamorment, recounted to her who she was and all that had betided her to that day, after such a fashion that the gentlewoman, putting faith in her words, and having, indeed, already in part heard her story from others, began to have compassion of her. The Countess, having related her adventures, went on to say, "You have now, amongst my other troubles, heard what are the two things which it behoveth me have, and I would have my husband, and to which I know none who can help me, save only yourself, if that be true which I hear, to wit, that the Count my husband is passionately enamored of your daughter." "Madam," answered the gentlewoman, "if the Count love my daughter I know not. Indeed he maketh a great show thereof. But an it be so, what can I do in this that you desire?" "Madam," rejoined the Countess, "I will tell you, but first I will e'en show you what I purpose shall ensue thereof to you, and you serve me. I see your daughter fair, and of age for a husband, and according to what I have heard, meseemeth I understand the lack of good to marry her with all it is, that causeth you keep her at home. Now I purpose, in requital of the service you shall do me, to give her forthright of mine own moneys such a dowry as you yourself shall deem necessary to marry her honorably." The mother, being needy, was pleased with the offer. Algates, having the spirit of a gentlewoman, she said, "Madam, tell me what I can do for you. If it consist with my honor, I will willingly do it, and you shall after do that which shall please you." Then said the Countess, "It behoveth me that you let tell the Count my husband by someone in whom you trust, that your daughter is ready to do his every pleasure. So she may but be certified that he loveth her as he pretendeth, the which she will never believe, except he send her the ring which he carrieth on his finger, and by which she hath heard he setteth such store. And he send you the ring, you must give it to me, and after send to him to say that your daughter is ready do his pleasure. Then bring him hither in secret, and privily put me to bed to him in the stead of your daughter. It may be God will vouchsafe me to conceive, and on this wise, having his ring on my finger and a child in mine arms of him begotten, I shall presently regain him and abide with him, as a wife should abide with her husband, and you will have been the cause thereof." This seemed a grave matter to the gentlewoman, who feared lest blame should haply ensue thereof to her daughter. Nevertheless, bethinking her it were honorably done to help the poor lady recover her husband, and that she went about to do this to a worthy end, and trusting in the good and honest intention of the Countess, she not only promised her to do it, but before many days, dealing with prudence and secrecy, in accordance with the latter's instructions, she both got the ring. Albeit this seemed somewhat grievous to the count, and adroitly put her to bed with her husband, in the place of her own daughter. In these first embracements, most ardently sought of the count, the lady, by God's pleasure, became with child of 2 sons, as her delivery in due time made manifest. Nor once only, but many times, did the gentlewoman gratify the countess with her husband's embraces, contriving so secretly that never was a word known of the matter, whilst the count still believed himself to have been, not with his wife, but with her whom he loved. And ween as he came to take leave of a morning, he gave her, at one time and another, divers goodly and precious jewels, which the countess laid up with all diligence. Then, feeling herself with child and unwilling to burden the gentlewoman farther with such an office, she said to her, Madam, thanks to God and you, I have gotten that which I desired, wherefore it is time that I do that which shall content you and after get me gone hence. The gentlewoman answered that, if she had gotten that which contented her, she was well pleased, but that she had not done this of any hope of reward, nay, for that her seemed it behoved her to do it, and she would do well. Madam, rejoined the countess, that which you say liketh me well, and so on my part one purpose, not to give you that which you shall ask of me by way of reward, but to do well, for that meseemeth behoveful so to do. The gentlewoman, then constrained by necessity, with the utmost shamefastness, asked her £100 to marry her daughter withal. But the countess, seeing her confusion and hearing her modest demand, gave her 500 and so many rare and precious jewels as were worth maybe as much more. With this the gentlewoman was far more than satisfied and rendered the countess the best thanks in her power. Whereupon the latter, taking leave of her, returned to the inn, whilst the other, to deprive Bertrand of all farther occasion of coming or sending to her house, removed with her daughter into the country to the house of one of her kinsfolk. And he, being a little after recalled by his vassals, and hearing that the countess had departed the country, returned to his own house. The countess, hearing that he had departed Florence and returned to his county, was mightily rejoiced and abode at Florence till her time came to be delivered, when she gave birth to 2 male children, most like their father, and let rear them with all diligence. Ween as it seemed to her time, she set out and came, without being known of any, to Montpellier, where having rested some days and made inquiry of the count and where he was, she learned that he was to hold a great entertainment of knights and ladies at Roussillon on All Saints' Day, and betook herself thither, still in her pilgrim's habit that she was wont to wear. Finding the knights and ladies assembled in the count's palace and about to sit down to table, she went up, with her children in her arms and without changing her dress, into the banqueting hall and making her way between man and man whereas she saw the count, cast herself at his feet and said, weeping, I am thine unhappy wife, who, to let thee return and abide in thy house, have long gone wandering miserably about the world. I conjure thee, in the name of God, to accomplish unto me thy promise upon the condition appointed me by the 2 knights I sent thee. For, behold, here in mine arms is not only one son of thine, but 2, and here is thy ring. It is time, then, that I be received of thee as a wife, according to thy promise. The count, hearing this, was all confounded and recognized the ring and the children also, so like were they to him. But yet he said, How can this have come to pass? The countess then, to his exceeding wonderment, and that of all others who were present, orderly recounted that which had passed and how it had happened. Whereupon the count, feeling that she spoke sooth and seeing her constancy and wit and moreover 2 such goodly children, as well for the observance of his promise as to pleasure all his liegemen and the ladies, who all besought him thenceforth to receive and honor her as his lawful wife, put off his obstinate despite, and raising the countess to her feet, embraced her and kissing her, acknowledged her for his lawful wife and those for his children. Then, letting clothe her in apparel such as beseemed her quality, to the exceeding joyance of as many as were there, and of all other his vassals who heard the news, he held high festival, not only all that day, but sundry others, and from that day forth still honored her as his bride and his wife and loved and tendered her over all.